Well, this morning we are diving into the book of Hebrews a little bit, and we're going to probably one of the most commonly read chapters of the book of Hebrews. We're in chapter 11 today, and we're continuing with the theme of once this way, now this way. And so today's is once faithless, now faith-filled. And so in Hebrews chapter 11, we see what is commonly called the faith chapter of Hebrews. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundation, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised, they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons, and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell, after the army had marched around them 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to a strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. All right. So in the book of Hebrews, we've got a lot. And it's interesting because I looked at the Greek a little bit, and I've told you before I'm not a really big in-depth Greek scholar, but I like to touch on it here and there and look at it. And it's interesting because here at the beginning of chapter 11, having just gone through 10 chapters of trying to encourage people to continue to be faithful in spite of what they were facing, and I'm going to go back and read chapter 10, verse 39 for you real quick. It says, "But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved." And so it's interesting because he says that, and then he dives into this. He defines for people what faith is, almost as if he's an attorney laying out a case. It's very interesting because kind of in the Greek there's this idea here of defining for the court, if you will, for these people what faith is. And so he says to them, faith is this steadfast assurance, this confidence in what we hope for. It's this unwavering, solid stance, this belief that cannot be changed no matter what circumstances life throws our way. I think I've told you before that I have a sign above the door in my bedroom, and it says, faith, hope is the ability to hear the music of the future. Faith is the willingness to dance to it today. Now, I don't dance much. Trust me on that one. Nobody wants to see my dancing. But the idea remains. Hope is the ability to hear the music of the future. Faith is the courage and willingness to dance to it today. It's interesting because as we look at these different stories of the people who have been found faithful, we see that each of them did not see in this life what had been promised to them. And so he lays out what faith is, and then, just like an attorney, he brings witnesses to account. He says, Abel, through his faith, brought God a better sacrifice. And Enoch and Abraham and Noah, And all of these people, it's like he's bringing witness after witness to the stand. And so we know, first of all, that this has been written to people who are well versed in the Hebrew Scriptures. They know the Hebrew Scriptures. They know these stories. That's why it's called the book of Hebrews. And so he's bringing to their remembrance over and over again all of these people who were found faithful in spite of the fact that they didn't see the fulfillment of the promises of God. Even Abraham, who got a taste of the faithfulness of God, right? Because he was an old man. He was 100 years old when his son was born. Which, of course, both he and Sarah were like, yeah, right. And yet God promised them that this would happen. And so they received their son with great joy, even though they tried to help God along. But even after the promise was fulfilled, they received Isaac, and then they were told by God, you need to understand the promise is going to be fulfilled through Isaac. Awesome. Great. That's cool. And so they got a bit of a primer of God's faithfulness because they had this child at such a late age. And then God calls Abraham out and says, bring your only son and sacrifice him on this mountain. What? And yet, Abraham says, okay, that's fine. You told me that the promise would be fulfilled through Isaac. Therefore, I know that no matter what happens, you're still going to fulfill that promise. So he follows through. He does what he's asked. He is found faithful. And so, like this faithful attorney, he continues to bring these people to the stand. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. By faith, Jacob blessed each of Joseph's sons. By faith, Joseph, when he was near his end, gave instructions on what should be done with his body once they left Egypt. By faith, Moses' parents hid him. By faith, Moses did this. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith, Rahab was found faithful. And what more shall I say? It's like he's bringing a snapshot of all of these stories from the Hebrew Scriptures to their mind and saying, God has proven himself faithful to these people over and over. Why? Because one, he's faithful in spite of some people's faithlessness. And two, because these people had faith in their God. And he lays it out and says, therefore, in chapter 12, verse 1, because we are surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, because we have these people's testimonies, and these people, and these people, and these people, and these people, because they were found faithful, because they found God faithful, let us run with endurance. Don't give up. Don't quit. Keep going. No matter what you face, keep going. Here's that marathon idea. Fix your eyes on Jesus. If If you had to fix your eyes on the finish line, you'd have an awful hard time. Because it's so far away. And so we don't have to fix our eyes on the finish line. Thank God. He says, fix your eyes on Jesus, who's right there, right with you. Let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author, the perfecter, the pioneer of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. What he's saying to these people, probably Hebrew believers in Rome, who were facing persecution and pain and difficulty for their faith in Jesus. These people who had been kicked out of the synagogue, who had been disowned by some of their own family members, who had been removed from fellowship with those who they loved. Don't quit. Keep going. Be faithful. I think I've said this before, but in running in a race, especially an endurance race, there comes times, and the biggest endurance race I've ever done is 5K. Just a little over 3 miles. And that's hard. That hurt a lot. And there were times when I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And that's only 3 miles. Morris has made marathons and half marathons, and he endured a lot more than I ever have. But as you're running this race, there are times when you're just like, it'd be a whole lot easier to just kind of go off to the side here and sit down and rest. Get a drink and forget about this race. This is madness. Why am I doing this to myself? I know a lot of runners who have said those exact words. I don't know why I do this to myself, but here I go again. You do this to yourself because you're nuts. That's why. No, they do it because of what happens at the end. And they get a pat on the back, an attaboy, a banana, and good job. I need a little more than a banana and a good job to keep me going. But he's saying to them, look, in my mind, I'm going, these people endured this punishment, this pain, these things for this medal and this half a banana? That's silly. But we are running a race that has so much greater of a prize at the end. We get to spend eternity with our beloved Savior. That's a pretty big deal. Like, I understand what 39 years looks like because I'm there. I'm 39 years old. I've done that much of it. I can't imagine eternity. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I've had a few good years in there, in that 39 years. An eternity of good years, oh, I'm looking forward to that. That's a little bit better prize than a silly medal to put up on my wall and a half a banana. It is. I'm not trying to pick on you for running a marathon for a medal and a half a banana. But look at what we have to look forward to. Do you think maybe perseverance is worth it? Do you think maybe pushing through the pain is worth it? Do you think that maybe everything we endure, whatever that looks like, might be worth it? As American Christians, we have to endure some taunting and some teasing. We haven't had to endure hardships in the sense that our brothers and sisters around the world have had to endure. There are people who have endured imprisonment and torture and even their own deaths to remain faithful, to endure, to push past. Why did they do that? Because they realize the prize that waits them is so much greater than anything they can imagine. Doesn't the writer, I don't even remember what book of the Bible it is, but doesn't the writer tell us that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can imagine what God has in store for those he loves? Do you think that might be worth pushing through? I don't know how many of you ladies gave birth naturally to your children. I obviously cannot begin to imagine the pain you had to endure to get there, because I've never had to do it personally. But I saw my wife go through 4 pregnancies, and those ended in C-sections. So she didn't have to necessarily push, but she still had to endure pain and hardship. Were your children worth it? Wanda, I don't know what you and Tim had to go through to adopt, but I suspect there was some pain and some endurance that you had to go through. Was it worth it? And my sister-in-law and her husband, what they had to endure, I walked with them to some extent through the adoption of their 2 children from South Korea. They had to endure a lot of headache, a lot of frustration, times of wanting to quit, times of wanting to say, forget it. I would guarantee you that they would say to you, it was worth it. Even with some of the headaches that they've had since. It's worth it. We have a greater reward in store if we would remain faithful. Endure. Don't quit. There may come times in this race when you just want to sit down and say, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. It's in those times that we need each other. It's in those times that we need somebody to look at us and say, I know it's hard. Don't quit. Get up. Keep going. Maybe you're at a place in your life where you've given up, where you have sat down on the race course and said, you know what, I'm done. Send a medic. Bring the stretcher and just take me on. You know what that person needs at that moment? Someone to come alongside of them and say, I know it's hard. Don't give up. Get up. Come on. I'll walk with you. Walk a mile. If that's what you got to do, walk a mile. But keep going. Don't quit.